Greetings, seekers of the unseen and listeners of forgotten truths. On the portal of the unknown, today we dive into a touching and deeply spiritual story. The journey of Tobias and the hidden meaning behind his trials, revealed in the Book of Tobit, a text considered apocryphal by Protestant tradition, yet widely embraced by Catholic and Orthodox faiths. Prepare yourselves to cross the veil that separates the visible from the invisible, the known from the hidden, for in this episode, we do more than just recount an ancient tale. We unveil layers of mystery that expose profound spiritual truths long concealed from the inattentive eye. This is not merely an old story, but a symbolic journey echoing the inner struggles of the human soul in its quest for light, redemption, and purpose. Tobias, the young protagonist of this sacred narrative, is not merely a historical or mythological figure. He is a representation of each of us on our own spiritual pilgrimage. From the earliest verses, the text introduces us to a setting shrouded in pain, injustice, and faith, with his father, Tobit, blind and afflicted, living in a foreign land among a people estranged from God. It is within this hostile environment that Tobias's mission begins. A mission that appears at first glance to be purely practical, to retrieve a sum of money left in another city. Yet what unfolds along the way is something far more profound, a divine calling, a journey that leads him to face unseen forces, confront his deepest fears, and uncover hidden truths revealed only to those willing to walk in faith. The inclusion of the archangel Raphael as Tobias's guide and companion is an early sign that this is not a simple travel story. Raphael is more than an angelic helper. He represents the constant presence of the divine in the path of those who trust, even when they do not fully understand the way. Every step Tobias takes, every challenge he faces, carries a hidden purpose, a spiritual test disguised as an everyday event. The battle against the demon Asmodeus, for example, is not only a spiritual confrontation in the traditional sense, but also a reflection of the inner war that each soul must wage against forces of destruction, lust, and fear, elements that seek to block our growth and fulfillment. This story, often overlooked or dismissed by certain religious traditions, holds immense symbolic power. It reminds us that even so-called apocryphal writings contain essential spiritual truths, especially when read with the eyes of the spirit rather than the letter. Tobias teaches us that obedience to the divine call, attentive listening to ancestral wisdom, and persistent faith are the pillars that support the true seeker. As he passes through valleys of shadow and faces entities of the unseen realm, Tobias does more than fulfill an external mission. He undergoes an inner transformation. He becomes more than a young man sent on a journey. He becomes an initiate, a spiritual warrior guided by the light from above. And it is precisely this transformation that we wish to explore more deeply. As Tobias continues his path, he encounters a young woman named Sarah, herself bound by sorrow and a terrible curse, a victim of a demonic force that has claimed the lives of every man who has tried to marry her. The meeting between Tobias and Sarah is not a mere coincidence. Imagine yourself surrounded by darkness, guided by nothing but faith. It is within this shadowy landscape that we meet Tobias, a young man embarking on a journey that is not merely physical but profoundly spiritual. In Tobit 5:4, a mysterious figure appears, so Tobias went out to look for someone who could go with him, and he found Raphael the angel, but he did not know that he was an angel of God. This moment changes everything. Unaware, Tobias walks alongside heaven itself, and this quiet step into the unknown marks the beginning of one of the most enigmatic and spiritually rich passages in all of biblical tradition. Raphael's arrival is not a stroke of luck or a random encounter. It is the deliberate unfolding of divine providence, operating behind the visible layers of reality. The presence of Raphael is a sacred reminder that heavenly assistance often comes in unexpected forms, that we are never as alone as we think. It prompts us to ask, how many times have we believed we were walking in darkness, when in fact we were being led by unseen hands? What makes this moment especially powerful is Tobias's ignorance of Raphael's true identity. This narrative choice is deeply intentional. It teaches us a fundamental principle about faith. Trust even when you don't understand, follow even when the way isn't clear, surrender even when the purpose is hidden. Tobias welcomes a stranger into his life with an open heart. not knowing that he's inviting a divine messenger to walk beside him. His decision reveals a rare kind of spiritual openness, one that transcends logic and embraces mystery. In a world where people rush to judge and rely heavily on reason, Tobias embodies the quiet courage of one who allows the divine to work through uncertainty. And it is within that space of humble surrender that the greatest miracles are born. Raphael doesn't just walk with Tobias. He mentors him, protects him, and unveils truths that can only be discovered through a heart willing to journey beyond appearances. This meeting is, in truth, a mirror of how we interact with the divine, where the extraordinary often wears the mask of the ordinary. Raphael appears as a fellow traveler, hiding his angelic nature, so Tobias can experience the journey authentically, unburdened by fear or reverence that might distort the path. The story urges us to see the sacred in the everyday, to recognize that spirituality is not locked away in temples or rituals, but alive in conversations, choices, and the unseen guidance of those we walk with. It is in the silent company of the divine, disguised as coincidence, intuition, or chance, that our souls are led toward their highest calling. This is not just a tale from the past. It's a map for modern seekers, a whispered truth for anyone daring enough to believe that the divine still walks among us. And so Tobias's journey begins to resemble a spiritual initiation. He is no longer just a boy searching for material security. He is a soul selected to be shaped by the road ahead. Raphael becomes the hidden master, the guide who arrives when the student is ready. Their bond reflects a universal theme found in mystical and esoteric traditions across cultures, that true growth begins when the seeker surrenders control and follows the path laid before them. What comes next in Tobias's story is not just a continuation of his mission. It's the unfolding of a divine lesson, layered in symbols, trials, and revelations that will forever alter the course of his life. Tobit's blindness, the father of Tobias, is not merely a physical condition. It is a powerful symbol. It represents the spiritual blindness of humanity, the inability to perceive God's paths amid suffering and hardship. Yet the Book of Tobit reveals something profound. Even within suffering, there is purpose. Tobit, a righteous and God-fearing man, loses his sight after performing a noble deed, burying a fellow Israelite who had been murdered. This contradiction is striking. How can a righteous act lead to such pain? The answer lies at the heart of the narrative. Divine plans transcend human logic. Spiritual transformation often uses pain as its crucible. Tobit's blindness forces him to depend on others, especially on his son, Tobias. It breaks his independence and challenges him to trust, to wait, and to believe without seeing. He begins to live by faith rather than by sight, a deep spiritual lesson echoed throughout the Christian tradition. Tobit's suffering also mirrors the human experience of frustration and perceived injustice. He does everything right, follows God's commandments, lives with integrity, and yet he loses everything: his health, his status, and his dignity. From a worldly perspective, this looks like a spiritual failure. But in the unseen realm, it's quite the opposite. Tobit is being refined, reshaped, spiritually purified. God does not abandon him, even when divine silence feels overwhelming. This offers a powerful message to anyone walking through darkness. God's silence is not absence. It is preparation. As Tobit weeps in prayer, his cry reaches heaven and is answered in a supernatural way. The angel Raphael is sent. What's remarkable is that Tobit's plea is heard at the same time as another, Sarah's. Her suffering mirrors Tobit's, and heaven answers both with one divine mission, intertwining two separate lives in a single thread of redemption. The union between Tobit's affliction and Sarah's torment reveals divine intelligence at work. God does not deal with lives in isolation. While Tobit prays for deliverance, Sarah, tormented by a demon who has slain 7 of her husbands, begs for mercy. Both cry out in desperation. Both are on the edge of despair, and it is at this moment of shared brokenness that heaven intervenes. Their sufferings harmonize like two chords in a divine melody, and Tobias becomes the key to their resolution. The transition from pain to healing is not chaotic. It is orchestrated with precision by an unseen hand. This is where the spiritual blindness begins to lift. What once looked like random suffering is now revealed as part of a greater plan. Tobit's blindness is no longer a curse. It becomes the start of deeper understanding, a new way of seeing with the soul rather than with the eyes. And here, the story deepens. Tobit's eventual healing symbolizes far more than the return of physical sight. It marks the close of a season of darkness and the rebirth of faith in the midst of turmoil. But healing doesn't arrive all at once. There is a process, one that involves pain, patience, and trust. The long nights, the unanswered prayers, the moments of despair, all become part of a sacred journey. Every tear Tobit sheds carries spiritual weight, for they are. Each trial faced by Tobias carries a deeper meaning. The battle with the fish, for example, represents the confrontation with inner evil. In Tobit 6:4-5, the angel instructs him to remove the gall, heart, and liver of the fish, elements that would later be used for healing and deliverance. What seems insignificant becomes a spiritual weapon. This battle with the fish isn't just a curious episode during a journey. It is a mirror of the internal struggles we all face. The fish, a symbol of hidden forces that arise in our path, appears when Tobias goes to fetch water, a basic need, revealing that evil often shows up in the most ordinary moments. But the angel Raphael does not allow evil to prevail. He instructs Tobias not to run, but to face it. That divine direction carries powerful spiritual weight. We must confront our fears, our traumas, and our hidden sins with courage and obedience to divine guidance. When Tobias removes the organs from the fish, he doesn't fully understand why. This reminds us that God often asks us to take steps that will only make sense later. The heart and liver of the fish, seemingly grotesque, become instruments of healing for Sarah, tormented by an evil spirit that had killed her 7 previous husbands. The gall will be used to restore the sight of his father Tobit. In other words, what was taken from a place of struggle and confrontation becomes the very key to someone else's liberation. The symbolism here is powerful. What we gain through our pain and battles can serve as medicine for others. Every tear, every conflict, every personal breakthrough can be used by God as a tool to bless lives around us. It's as if our scars become spiritual maps of healing. God turns pain into purpose. He transforms the struggle into a mission, the ordinary into the miraculous. Furthermore, Raphael's presence as Tobias's guide reinforces the idea that even when we don't understand the purpose of our trials, we are never alone. Raphael represents the divine presence walking with us, even when our eyes can't see it. Tobias didn't know he was walking beside an angel, and yet he was being led with divine precision. This shows that divine providence often works in hidden, quiet ways, yet with incredible effectiveness. The angel reveals the path, protects, teaches, and at the right moment reveals the purpose of each item collected on the journey. The liver, for example, will be burned like a spiritual incense to drive out the evil spirit. The heart will be part of the liberation ritual. The gall will restore lost vision. Every part has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. Even what seems repulsive to the human eye becomes precious in God's hands. This passage invites us to see life from a new perspective. The battles we face may contain, hidden in their difficulty, the tools that will heal us and also heal others. Tobias, an ordinary young man, obeys without questioning, and it's precisely this willingness to trust in the divine process that enables him for the mission ahead. He doesn't understand, but he trusts. He doesn't question, but he obeys. And that's exactly what transforms his path into a journey of redemption. Tobias's quiet faith is what makes him an instrument. The marriage of Sarah, whose life was marked by tragedy and mourning, reveals a deeper layer within the Book of Tobit, redemptive love. Sarah, a woman tormented by a demonic spirit that had killed her 7 previous husbands on their wedding night, carried not only the weight of repeated failure, but also a nearly unbearable spiritual anguish. She no longer hoped for happiness, only survival. But the arrival of Tobias changes everything. Not because Tobias is exceptional by nature, but because his obedience and faith make him a vessel of divine deliverance. In Tobit 8:3, after the couple prays together on their wedding night, a prayer that reflects the purity of their intentions and their total surrender to the divine plan, the angel took the liver and heart of the fish and placed them on the embers of incense, and the demon was repelled to the upper regions of Egypt, and Raphael followed and bound him there. This is not merely an exorcism, it is a powerful symbol of how love, consecrated to God, becomes a weapon of liberation. This moment is charged with spiritual significance. Unlike her previous suitors, Tobias approaches Sarah not with selfish desire, but with reverence, fear of God, and trust in his promises. The prayer they share is one of the most emotionally moving and instructive portions of biblical literature. They ask the Lord to bless them, to ensure that their union is not driven by lust, but dedicated to bearing fruit and fulfilling God's purpose. They surrender to one another in the presence of the divine, and that surrender changes everything. This kind of love, one that acknowledges its own fragility and seeks strength from above, is the kind that heals, that restores, that breaks chains. Their marriage becomes more than a social contract. It becomes a sacred altar where obedience, prayer, and the fish's organs become tools for spiritual warfare and ultimate victory over evil. It's impossible to overlook the beauty of Raphael's action as he burns the liver and heart of the fish. These two vital organs, symbols of emotion and life itself, are consumed on the coals of incense. The act is not just ritualistic, it's poetic. What Tobias acquired through his earlier confrontation with the fish is now being offered up as a holy sacrifice. And the results are immediate. The demon flees, the oppression is broken, and the curse is lifted. Tobias is no longer just a groom, he becomes an instrument of deliverance. Sarah is no longer a cursed widow, she is a soul restored. What began in sorrow ends in redemption. Their marriage is transformed from a human covenant into a spiritual alliance with eternal consequences. This episode teaches that love, when rooted in faith and divine purpose, doesn't just survive adversity, it destroys it. Sarah represents all those who believe they are doomed to perpetual suffering. Tobias represents those called to love despite fear, trusting that God is in control. And Raphael, the angel, reminds us that we are never alone when we choose to walk according to heaven's design. In an age where love is often trivialized, this passage from the Book of Tobit restores the purest meaning of marriage. A union that not only fills the heart, but drives out darkness, binds what was broken, and illuminates the path back to divine healing. And in the end, Tobias's return with the healing of his father becomes the most beautiful image of divine restoration, not just a physical restoration, but a spiritual, emotional, and familial one. After a long journey of trials, facing visible and invisible dangers, Tobias comes home not only with wealth and a wife, but with the key to give his father what he longed for the most, his sight. Yet this healing is not merely about his eyes. It is the climax of a spiritual process, where every action, every free suffering, every step of faith and obedience leads to the unveiling of God's grace. In Tobit 11:11-13, we read, "Then Tobias breathed into his father's eyes, applied the fish's gall, and Tobit regained his sight." This moment is as symbolic as it is miraculous. The breath upon the eyes, a simple yet deeply spiritual act, echoes the breath of life from Genesis, suggesting that something new is being born, a new vision, a new hope, a new chapter. The gall of the fish, which once seemed insignificant, now reveals its ultimate purpose. The substance retrieved with effort during the battle with the fish becomes the instrument of healing. It teaches us that everything we face, even what seems useless or painful, can be transformed into a blessing when guided by God. Tobit's blindness, which at first plunged him into sorrow and despair, now becomes a testimony. He who once could not see, neither physically nor spiritually, now beholds the face of his son, his daughter-in-law, and above all, he recognizes God's hand in every detail of his story. Tobit's soul is healed along with his eyes. The disbelief, the bitterness, and the sadness are swept away by the light of the miracle. He doesn't just see, he understands. And that understanding is what marks true restoration. Tobias's return also symbolizes the return of a son who went out, faced the world, and triumphed, not by his own strength, but through his faithfulness. The narrative echoes the return of the prodigal son, with one key difference. Tobias never strayed. He was sent out and returned as a vessel of healing. It's as though every step of the journey had been orchestrated so that, in the end, the entire family would witness not only the power of heaven, but God's faithfulness to those who remain steadfast in the midst of darkness. Raphael, the angel who had appeared as an ordinary man, finally reveals his identity and mission. "I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand in the glorious presence of the Lord." And with that revelation, everything makes sense. The story wasn't guided by coincidence, it was shaped by divine intervention. This conclusion invites us to reflect. How many times do we go through pain without understanding its purpose, blinded to the path of God in our suffering? But the Book of Tobit shouts a powerful truth. God is never absent. He guides, prepares, sends, and heals. Sometimes the answer comes from where we least expect it. It may come through a stranger on the road, an unexpected battle, a silent prayer, or even something we once thought was worthless, like the gall of a fish. In the end, everything works together for the glory of God to be revealed. The angel Raphael, whose name means God heals, is a constant presence throughout the Book of Tobit, a silent guardian walking alongside Tobias from the very beginning. Though Tobias believes he's traveling with an ordinary companion, Raphael is anything but. He waits in quiet faithfulness, guiding, protecting, and intervening, all without revealing his divine identity. Until the moment arrives, not by chance, but by divine timing when he unveils the truth. In Tobit 12:15, Raphael says, "I am Raphael, one of the 7 holy angels who present the prayers of the saints and enter into the presence of the glory of the Holy One." This isn't just a confession. It's a moment where heaven touches earth, where the unseen becomes visible, and the divine purpose behind every step of Tobias's journey is made clear. Raphael's presence isn't just about supernatural assistance. It's a powerful reminder that God is never distant from our suffering. Every tear cried, every whispered prayer, every desperate plea is not only heard, but carried, personally, into the courts of heaven by a servant of the Most High. Raphael is not a bystander in the story. He is the bridge between humanity and the divine, walking silently beside us even when we think we're alone. And when he finally reveals who he is, he doesn't demand praise for himself. Instead, he redirects all glory to God, saying, "Bless God, exalt his name, proclaim his works before all the living." It's a declaration that every miracle, every healing, and every answered prayer is rooted in the love and mercy of God. The angel's revelation brings another vital truth. The majority of miracles happen in silence. They unfold in ordinary moments, through conversations, decisions, coincidences that are anything but. Behind each moment is a heavenly orchestration, a divine choreography we often can't perceive. Raphael represents that hidden order. He's a reminder that what seems like chance is often God's design, and what feels like silence is often divine activity in disguise. His name, God Heals, becomes the summary of the entire journey. Tobit's blindness is healed, Sarah is delivered from torment, Tobias is safely led, and an entire family is restored in faith and unity. All along, the healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, generational. This final part of the book isn't just a conclusion, it's a divine signature written across every event that came before. It's as if heaven itself is saying, "This was me. I was with you. I never left." Raphael's presence reminds us that divine help is never far, that in every trial there's an angel in motion. In every prayer there's a messenger carrying it upward. In every pain there's a plan. And though we often don't see it, heaven is never inactive. The story of Tobias doesn't just end with healing, it ends with revelation, restoration, and a renewed faith that God, through his messengers, is always working behind the scenes. This story is a profound reminder. Our trials are not in vain. Nothing we go through escapes God's sight. No tear is wasted, no difficult path is meaningless, and no silence from heaven is a sign of abandonment. The Book of Tobit is more than an ancient narrative. It is a spiritual mirror reflecting our own journey, filled with struggles, pain, doubts, and above all, hope. It shows us that even when everything seems lost, when pain feels heavier than faith, God is still working. And most surprisingly, he often works through the simplest means, the most unexpected people, and the quietest moments. The healing didn't come from grand rituals or spectacular events. It came from the bile of a fish, something so insignificant in human eyes, yet transformed into a miracle in God's hands. That teaches us something powerful. Never underestimate what God can do with what seems small. There are angels beside us. That's another truth the story of Tobit gives us as an eternal gift. Even when we don't see them, even when we don't feel them, there is a heavenly presence walking with us. And not just as spectators, but as active agents of divine care. The angel Raphael was with Tobiah from the beginning, not to remove the challenges, but to guide each step, strengthen his heart, and ensure that God's purpose was fulfilled. And that's so important. God doesn't promise a life without problems, but he does promise company, direction, and victory at the right time. Tobiah faced the unknown, wrestled with the fish, overcame fear, married a woman marked by tragedy, and then had to return and face the responsibility of healing his father. In each of these phases, the angel was there, sometimes silent, but always present. That's how it is with us too. Many people wait for grand miracles, for obvious supernatural manifestations, but they forget that God works in the details. The marriage of Tobiah and Sarah wasn't just a ceremony, it was an act of liberation. The journey wasn't just travel, it was a path toward maturity. Tobit's blindness wasn't just a physical issue, it was spiritual preparation to see more deeply. The Book of Tobit shows that everything, absolutely everything, can become a divine instrument when placed in God's hands. And perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons in this story. What feels like pain today may become healing for someone else tomorrow. What seems like failure might be the very tool God is shaping for your victory. And what feels invisible, like the presence of an angel, could be your greatest protection. So when life feels meaningless, when the path seems dark, when the pain is too heavy, remember Tobit. Remember that hidden purposes are woven into trials. Healing is found in the smallest things. Angels are by your side, and there is a God who turns stories marked by pain into testimonies of hope. Don't give up in the middle of the process, because when the ending is written by God, it's always greater than anything we could imagine. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the Portal of the Unknown. Here, every trial has a purpose, and every shadow may conceal a celestial light. On this channel, we dive into narratives that go far beyond what the eyes can see. Stories that challenge logic, reveal ancient secrets, and connect us to profound spiritual dimensions. Each week, a new episode that might shift the way you see the invisible. We're not just here to tell stories, but to awaken awareness. If you believe there's more between heaven and earth than what is visible, this is your place. Turn on the notification bell, leave a like, and share this message with someone who also needs to see with the eyes of the soul. See you in the next video, where mystery and faith walk hand in hand.